Welcome to the complete beginner's guide to Formula 1, which I've compressed down into different videos. This video is all about rules. Rules are meant to be broken, you say? Well, not in Formula 1. Let's get stuck in. The first thing you need to know when it comes to Formula 1 is that there are actually two types of rules, technical and sporting. The technical regulations control the whole process of designing the car and fielding a car that conforms to the rules. Remember Brazil in 2021 when Lewis Hamilton's rear wing was out by a measly 2mm? Well, that's a technical infringement. Sporting regulations, on the other hand, are about what happens on the circuit. For instance, when one driver is defending from another and they make contact, or being out of position on the grid for the start of a race. These rules are lengthy, to say the least, especially the technical rules. It would be impossible and absurdly boring to cover all of them in one video, so I'm just going to pick out a few important things, starting with the cost cap. The cost cap was introduced in the last few years, and it outlines a set amount of money that each team cannot spend more than. The current value is set at $135 million, down from $145 in 2021. This does get tweaked slightly though for inflation, so it can go up by say 2 or 3 million. This includes pretty much everything in terms of operating the team, attending races, car parts, transport costs, spares, garage equipment, you name it. What isn't included in the cost cap are things like driver salaries, property costs, travel costs for individuals, as well as the wages of the 3 highest paid staff members. I'm sure you will have heard of the 2021 cost cap breach by Red Bull, which was treated fairly leniently as the cost cap is still fairly new. They breached the cost cap by 1.6% and received a $7 million fine, ironic I know, and also a 10% reduction in their aerodynamic testing allowance. If you don't know what that is, then check out my video on F1 cars. I'll link it below, or just click right up top. The cost cap is serious, and it's designed to offer more fair play across the board. $140 million may seem like an awful lot of money, and of course it is, but back before this, some of the big teams like Ferrari would easily be spending $500 million on a season, or more, whereas some of the smaller teams aren't even getting up to the current cost cap due to a lack of sponsorship money. Even still, it at least means teams just can't throw money at the problem. But as we've seen, the biggest teams still have the best personnel and end up making the best cars. Speaking of throwing money at the problem, in years gone by, teams would test their new cars wherever they wanted. In the 80s, a new design would be made and they'd just throw it on a track. This isn't possible anymore in modern Formula 1. There is a predetermined testing period, usually 3 days before a season starts, that can be used to test your new machines. It used to be in Barcelona in Spain, but is now in Bahrain the week before the season starts, which also happens to be the first race of the season, so it makes sense. Despite the restriction on testing, Formula 1 teams do use current loopholes to get their Formula 1 cars out on track. Every team is allowed a 15km shakedown, but they can't do it on a current Formula 1 layout. Bearing in mind I said layout, so they can do it on a Formula 1 track, but it has to be a different configuration than one that's ran in the Formula 1 calendar. They are also allowed 2 promotional filming days that can be up to 100km each. These promotional days are in the rules so teams can get promo and marketing material of their car, videos, images, that sort of thing. But obviously teams want to use it earlier on in the season to get a bit of running on their car even before testing. It's normally the case that the teams will run one of these promotional days even before testing has started. They're pretty restrictive though, and the tyres that Pirelli provide are not representative of the tyres they would use on a race weekend. Outside of that, there are no other options for a Formula 1 team to run their current spec Formula 1 car. They can, however, run the simulator as much as they want, and they often do. Alright, let's talk penalties and the race director. I'll try not to mention Too late. But the current race director's duties are the responsibility of Niels Wittich. The race director controls the weekend's racing. They decide on track limits, when the safety cars are deployed, when drivers need warnings for their race conduct. However, the race director does not decide on penalties. This is where some confusion often lies. The stewards are the ones who look at the on-track racing incidents and decide if it deserves a penalty. So think of it like the justice system, for want of a better analogy. The police, aka the race director, can suggest that the justice system take a look at a crime, and the justice system, the stewards in this analogy, will decide if a punishment is required. They will investigate, and if necessary, apply a penalty. Again, if they feel it's required. This could be a 5-second penalty, a 10-second penalty, all the way up to a drive-through penalty for the most severe offences. That won't happen very often though. The 3 race stewards are different for every race, and they're usually ex-drivers. There are also quite a few rules around the working hours of race engineers and also mandatory shutdown of team facilities. During a race weekend, there are 3 curfew periods called restricted periods. These are on Wednesday evening, Thursday evening, and Friday evening. So RP1, RP2, and RP3 representing Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. These curfews stop the operational personnel from doing overnighters regularly, which was pretty common in the 70s onwards. Each team has a certain amount of jokers that they can use for these restrictive periods, and they're allowed to use them in an emergency. When they use them, it means that this curfew won't apply, but they're only allowed a certain amount for the season. Currently, teams are allowed 4 exceptions for RP1, but that's reducing down to 2 for 2024. They're allowed 3 breaches of RP2 in 2023, but that drops down to 2 in 2024 as well. And then RP3, which is on the Friday night, will remain at 2 exceptions. F1 is also increasing the length of the curfew in 2024 to further emphasize the well-being of team personnel. Further on from this, every Formula 1 team must adhere to something called the summer shutdown, and also a recently approved F1 winter shutdown. These are periods over the year, I'm pretty sure you can guess during what seasons they fall, where every team must completely shut down and no work can take place on the car or in the factories. Only basic functions are permissible just to allow the team to tick over. The summer shutdown is 14 consecutive days, usually during the end of July and beginning of August. The winter shutdown's length hasn't been confirmed just yet, but it will likely be the week between Christmas and New Year. Again, the teams will have to completely shut down. As you can imagine, the rule books for Formula 1 are extensive and way too long to cover in one video, even 10 videos. But hopefully this offered you some insight and helped in some way. In the next video, we're going to be quick firing through some key terms that you may have heard but didn't know what they meant. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, and I'll see you next time.